Welcome to SSC's Hazard Communication and Chemical Safety presentation. The objectives of this training are to educate you about the potential hazards of chemicals in the workplace, container labeling requirements including pictograms, procedures for the safe use of chemicals, safety data sheets SDS, and personal protective equipment PPE. One thing to remember before we begin is that the first rule of chemical safety is know what you're working with and how to protect yourself and others. Common physical hazards from chemicals we are most likely to come into contact with are compressed gases, combustible liquids, flammable liquids or gases, and corrosive chemicals. Other hazards that exist include explosive, unstable, or water-reactive items and oxidizers. Health hazardous chemicals include those that are known carcinogens, poisons, corrosive such as acids, allergens, and otherwise harmful to your skin, internal organs, or nervous system. Routes of entry into the body are the lungs by breathing vapors, mists, or dust, the skin if liquid or dust contacts unprotected skin, gets into a cut, or splashes in your eyes, the mouth if you do not wash your hands properly and eat something after handling chemicals. The law requires that all containers must be properly labeled. These labels must be produced and attached to the container by the chemical manufacturer or distributor. Chemicals can be transferred from a large container into a smaller one, a spray bottle for example. But the new container must be properly labeled with a silk screened or peel and stick label. Both silk screened bottles and peel and stick labels are available from the manufacturer or distributor. Please remember that using a permanent marker to label a container with something like glass cleaner is not an acceptable substitute. Note, labels on containers of hazardous chemicals must not be removed or defaced. Chemical labels must include the product identifier, which is the name or number used for hazardous chemical on a label or in the SDS. The signal word that is used to indicate the level of severity of hazard and alert the associate to a potential hazard on the label. These signal words used are danger, used for the most severe hazards, and warning, which is used for less severe hazards. The hazard statement assigned to the hazard class and category that describes the nature of the hazard of a chemical, including where appropriate, the degree of hazard. Pictogram, which may include a symbol plus other graphic elements that is intended to convey specific information about the hazards of a chemical. A precautionary statement that describes recommended measures that should be taken to minimize or prevent adverse effects resulting from exposure to a hazardous chemical or improper storage or handling, personal protective equipment, or special storage requirements. The name, address, and telephone number of the chemical manufacturer, importer, or other responsible party. As mentioned in the previous slide, pictograms are a composition that may include a symbol plus other graphic elements such as a border, background pattern, or color that is intended to convey specific information about the hazards of a chemical. There are 8 mandatory pictograms designated for use, and one that is optional referred to on this slide. There's health hazard, flame, explanation mark, corrosion, gas cylinder, skull and crossbones, exploding bomb, flame over circle, and the environment, which is a non-mandatory pictogram. In addition to the OSHA required labels, you may also see some chemicals with the National Fire Protection Agency 704 or HMIS labels. The purpose of these 2 labels is to help first responders quickly identify fire-related hazards associated with a chemical, and they are often included on chemical containers and SDSs. A number from 0 to 4, indicating severity, are included in red, yellow, and blue sections, with the white section reserved for special symbols. What if there is no label or the label cannot be read? Stop. Do not use the chemical. Tell your supervisor the chemical is unlabeled. If the chemical is known, read the SDS and place another label on the container. If the chemical cannot be positively identified, properly dispose of the chemical and the container. Safety data sheets, or SDSs, provide specific chemical safety information. Each chemical has its own SDS. SDS is written by the chemical manufacturer. SDS are kept in the workplace for your use, are available to the manufacturer or supplier. Do you know where the SDS book is in your operation? If you need to review an SDS but can't find it, ask your supervisor. SDS provide a variety of information in 16 separate categories. The most common categories we are concerned with are Section 1, Identification. Section 2, Hazard Identification. Section 4, First Aid Measures. Section 7, Handling and Storage. Section 8, Exposure Controls Personal Protection. Section 9, Physical and Chemical Properties. Section 10, Stability and Reactivity. Section 11, Toxicological Information. Section 13, Disposal Considerations. Since potential exposure to the chemicals we use each day is not avoidable, personal protective equipment, PPE, is necessary to protect yourself from the hazards associated with potential exposure to the chemicals. The PPE provided and/or required includes, but is not limited to, safety goggles, face shields, protective gloves, apron. Review the SDS for specific requirements and contact your supervisor if you cannot find the PPE necessary. Remember to check the PPE prior to use and make sure it is not damaged. Also, bear in mind that PPE listed on the SDS as required must be worn at all times, and the PPE listed as recommended should be worn. Wear safety goggles and a face shield if required when dispensing chemicals. Use the correct chemical-resistant gloves when handling chemicals. Properly clean and store PPE after use. Don't take PPE used for chemicals home, while risk exposing your family to potentially harmful chemicals. Know the location of emergency eye wash stations. Chemicals can be used safely if you know the hazards associated with the chemicals and how to protect yourself. They are used only for approved purposes. They are stored properly and in approved designated areas. You use the required personal protective equipment. You wash your skin immediately if you come into contact with them. You know where the SDS are located and how to use them. Containers are properly labeled. You immediately report leaks and spills. You dispose of chemicals and containers properly. If you are new to a unit, please ask your supervisor to make sure you know how to locate the SDS station and chemical storage area. Also know the proper storage practices. Location and demonstrate wear of PPE. Locate and know how to operate the eye wash station, and review the chemical list. For additional information, refer to the Hazardous Communication HAZCOM program contained in Section 4.9 of the Compass Corporate Safety Manual. You have now completed your HAZCOM training. Please click on the link in the video description in order to take the quiz. And remember, safety first.